Welcome to the June 27th service event of the North Texas Church of Freethought. The recording of this brief presentation later on YouTube. Our presentation lengths vary. This one is going to be pretty brief, and then we go into after discussion, which is not posted on YouTube. If you're watching this later on YouTube after the live event, please like us and comment below, subscribe, and spread the word about us. Check out our other videos on YouTube. Many of those are from our in-person services over the years. And check out our quite extensive website. It's been up for quite a while, and at the bottom of every page on our website, there's a place to sign up to get the notices of these Zoom sessions. So you can also participate in the after discussion that we don't post, as I said. We've also resumed some in-person get-togethers. We're going to have one next week. It's actually going to be at the Embassy Suites, and I believe it's Grapevine at that location, but if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get all the details. We recommend that only if you've been immunized, of course. We're on meetup.com, where you can find out about our every Friday game night in Dallas. Of course, we, as I said, only recommend the in-person events if you've had the COVID-19 immunization. Faith and doubt, those are of great interest to us. Atheists are not just people who sit around and don't even think about religious questions. In fact, most atheists are, it's been studied and found that most atheists know more about the Bible than believers. So let's take a few minutes to think about these subjects. Christians, the religious majority in the United States, famously say that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. There are some other translations which use slightly different words. This is from the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 1. The so-called letter to the Hebrews does not anywhere indicate who the author is. Traditionally, it was attributed to Paul, but the author is now considered unknown. For some reason, this passage is admired by believers as encapsulating a great truth. But if you start teasing at it, it falls apart. Do hopes or even reasonable expectations have substance? And how can things not seen, what cannot be perceived or otherwise be detected, be evidence? Thomas Paine's comment applies to this, as to so many other things in Holy Scriptures. Assertions that are never questioned tend to seem not questionable. 20th century British mathematician and philosopher Bertrand Russell stated the matter, I think, much more honestly than whoever wrote the New Testament letter to the Hebrews, as he said, "Where there's evidence, no one speaks of faith. You only speak of faith when you wish to substitute emotion for evidence." And that's not always bad. If you go to a restaurant and you can't decide between the apple pie and the cherry pie, and you choose the cherry pie, you say, "Oh, I have faith it's going to be a much better tasting than the apple pie," and then you might or might not agree with that assessment. And yet faith is widely praised. You can find just tons of these memes all over the internet, some with quotations or semi-quotations from the Bible, but linking faith with love and all these other things, your dreams and getting what you want and so forth. And I think, again, we could look at some of these things and say, no, they don't really hold up. But doubt, on the other hand, it's not only not praised, it is vilified. It is almost impossible to find quotations praising or otherwise extolling doubt. And yet, wiser people realize that being hopeful is often the only thing that one may do when one has done everything else. It's not that it's so wonderful, it's better than just being obsessed with worry. And courage is not the absence of fear and doubt, but the ability to act despite them. So doubt is indeed only a bad thing when it paralyzes and immobilizes, but it can also motivate to re-examine and reassess things. Faith, on the other hand, is as bad or worse when it motivates unreasonable and even cruel behavior. And here's Bertrand Russell again. I think this is one that ought to be in some holy books, that the problem with the world is the fools and fanatics that are always so certain of themselves and wiser people so full of doubts. Or like the quotation from Alexander Pope, that fools rush in where angels fear to tread. When faith means religious faith, it's an even bigger problem. Because religious faith is, of course, in the supernatural. It's faith in the counterfactual, the irrational, and the absurd. That's a very different sort of faith than trusting that one will pass an exam having studied as best one knows how. You see apologists and others doing this all the time. They say faith meaning religious faith, but then when you question it, oh gosh, now they're talking about faith that when you sit in a chair, it's not going to collapse beneath you. It's a very different faith, religious faith that is, than expecting that one's car will start when one turns the key or pushes the on button. It's a very different faith than taking an antibiotic to treat an infection. And here's the even bigger problem. When our own government, using our tax dollars and the levers of the state that are supposed to be used to provide for the general welfare, as the Constitution puts it, is indisputably engaged in promoting religion. And while it pretends with this generic faith term to be putting all religions on an equal footing, it's clearly promoting those religions and only those religions that are based on faith beliefs in the supernatural. This is going on and has been going on for a long time at all levels of government. Much of it started up by the second President Bush, of course. Those seals at the bottom, left to right if you can't read them, those are from Indiana, Michigan, and Tennessee. But here's the thing. Not every religion is based on faith beliefs in the supernatural. This is the case for some varieties of Buddhism, and it seems for some strains of Hinduism as well. The basis of Taoism and Confucianism is not supernatural. There are also non-theistic Quakers and even Christian atheists. You see on the top right, I don't think they have any mega churches, but that's what came out of the death of God theology. Some clever people took the death of God and turned it into its own theology. And then there's ethical culturists, as well as humanistic Jews. You see on the bottom right, there's a seal of apparently in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, group of humanistic Jews. We ourselves reject supernaturalism. In fact, we also reject the idea that religion is or should be about believing in things, much less about believing in things on faith. Those things they're just the waste products, the detritus of the Abrahamic religions. The real basis for progress and improvement in religion as well as in science is not faith and belief. Rather, it is doubt, skepticism, questioning, and critical thinking. How else can one learn and grow? How else can one give up ideas and beliefs for better ones? But the reality, sadly, maddeningly, is that our government and its equating religion with faith is, as I said, choosing sides. This was part of the banner that was on the email that you would have gotten yesterday morning if you're signed up on our notices list. This is just favoring some religions over others, and it's favoring the old growth, the most ossified, inflexible, and rigid forms of religion, which at the very least should have to compete on a level playing field with their more innovative and forward-looking competitors. And this is everywhere in our government. Look here, it's in the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I wouldn't even be surprised if it were somewhere in NASA. But this undermines real religious liberty. Think about this. It means that the government supports and encourages certain points of view while opposing others in the marketplace of ideas when it comes to religion and religious ideas. And this is hostile to religious liberty. Instead of sending the message that religion is truly important, it clearly says that faith-based supernaturalistic religions are the only religious ideas and opinions that matter. This is from the Anti-Defamation League. You can see there the logo at the upper left. There is simply no question that this is unconstitutional and at odds with one of the core principles on which American government is founded, the separation of state and church. By the way, this is a PDF that's online. You can download it and read all about it, Compassion in Action, starting off with President Bush's faith-based initiatives. All this, of course, is despite the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in the 1965 case of Seeger that for the purposes of the law, and of course, the law always has to define everything it's going to deal with, right? So this is the Supreme Court saying that religion is whatever occupies in the life of its possessor a place parallel to that filled by the God of theistic religions. What a clever way of defining religion. If the government were really interested in all religions and religious points of view, if it were really interested in religious liberty, it really wanted all religions to be on an equal footing and leave it to people to have the freedom to decide what is important and not. It would just say religious instead of faith-based. And there's the same problem, of course, with the National Day of Prayer that we had last month, since that favors those religions that include that ritual. It pretends that prayer is common to all religions, indeed that prayer, like faith, is what religion is, canceling all those religions and those people for whom prayer is not a part of their practice. And then you see people complaining about cancel culture. Isn't this canceling? Earlier ADL image included the fact that these faith-based initiatives and charitable choice are harmful to civil rights. Now just look at this entry. I found this in an FAQ section having to do with federal funding to religious groups on a government website. Look at that orange that I've highlighted there, drawn attention to. How wonderful that these government grants permit faith-based groups to promote common values, a sense of community and unity of purpose, and shared experiences through service, all of which contribute to a religious organization's effectiveness. And remember, this is at public expense. You see that it compares religious discrimination to, of all things, academic qualifications. Imagine the mental state of the person who wrote this. We'll leave it there for now, though so much more could be said about these subjects of faith and doubt, more broadly understood, in more philosophical and especially religious terms. So we'll definitely come back to this at some point, but this was enough to get us started. A few things happened on this date in history. In 1844, Joseph and Hiram Smith were killed. Well, who the heck were they? Well, Joseph Smith was the guy who started out the Mormon Church, and Hiram was his brother. They were actually killed in a, not escaping, but a mob attacked the Carthage, Illinois jail where they were being held. Joseph went down firing guns and killing people. What a great example. I've often kind of wondered why this isn't made more of a big deal in the Mormon Church. I mean, they said at the time and since that he was martyred, but the circumstances of his death were not quite like those of Jesus. I'm not sure that they were any worse or better, but anyways. In 1898, Joshua Slocum, he completed the first solo circumnavigation of the globe. He was a guy from Nova Scotia and sailed around the world all by himself in his boat. And in 1950, this was the date that the U.S. committed to the Korean War. Here is our church's creed. Really just our principles or guiding lights. We've all seen this before, but worth thinking about often to keep us in mind. It's easy to remember since it spells out real, reason, figuring things out. That's the only faith I think a freethinker has, but what kind of faith is that? Because everybody has that. Where others depart from reason that distinguishes us. Enjoyment, or what the economists call utility, is different than appreciation, which is not taking anything for granted, making a assessment of our lives and what's going on in it. And no matter all the bad things that happen, realizing the universe has not singled us out. As Alba has sometimes said that she's discovered from Buddhism that everyone suffers. And finally, love, loving what we value and valuing what we love, for love and values are inextricably linked. Before we get on to our after discussion, just remember it's an important mission of Freethought and freethinkers to practice and encourage respectful discussion. I don't think this gets as much emphasis in the atheist community as it should. It seems that it is most difficult to do this, to remain civil when it comes to the subject of politics. Let us keep in mind that we especially need to respect others, not their ideas, but the people who have them, not just when everything they say is agreeable to us, but precisely when their views strike us as wrong and even loathsome. This kind of parallels the New Testament where Jesus said everyone loves their friends. You have to love your enemies too. You could really pick that apart. But it is in these situations that we're really challenged. Do we really understand someone correctly when they say something that we just think is totally stupid and wrong? And even if we did, why do they hold such views? What brought them to those ideas? And let's not just immediately say, oh, it's because they're bad people, because that stops all thinking. It just leads nowhere. Oh, well, they're bad people, that explains it all. What, if anything, may cause them to doubt such views? That's a good question to ask, or at least what may encourage them to at least have respect for those who do not share their views. Too often disagreements devolve into incivility, and nothing hardens disagreement more than incivility. Especially as atheists, we are looked on with suspicion and fear by most believers. If we cannot learn to be civil with our fellow freethinkers, how are we going to make any headway with the God hates fags people? As we've discussed before, there are people who've left the Westboro Baptist Church, those God hates fags people. So there's hope for anyone, however unlikely it may seem. The most important sort of diversity is not that of the degree of melanin in the skin or other physical characteristics. The most important sort of diversity is the diversity of ideas, shaped by a diversity of backgrounds and experiences. I don't think it really matters that we have a diversity of skin color or height or age or weight. I mean, you know, it's important, I suppose, but really what we need is a diversity of backgrounds and experiences, because we are each of us trapped in our own background, our own experiences, and how much better we can be if we can benefit from learning about the point of view of other people. So there are lots of ways to interact with civility, and we can do better if we determine to do so just by thinking about how we're going to do that. We can consider ideas without accepting them also. Indeed, we benefit when we consider wrong ideas and figure out why and in what ways they're wrong, and sometimes what little kernel of truth they may contain, or what it is about them that may appeal to otherwise well-intended people. Remember, when people have bad ideas, it's not because they're bad, they just have bad ideas. Always, always let us not believe too much or too strongly. It's enough to know of many things without becoming very attached to any of them. For this is the way of freethinkers. Finally, remember that we are minds and bodies. We should strive to be aware of our physical and emotional status, even as we try to understand and probably focus and pay the most attention to ideas. But this is all happening in our physical bodies, and in order to effectively grasp and understand and then share with other people our own ideas, it's important that we kind of keep track of our physical and emotional state. Finally, we ask not just for your moral support and participation in the discussion of the ideas important to us, but also for your financial support. And I want to thank those of you who you know who you are, who went and donated through our website on PayPal last time around. I'd encourage you to do that again, and let us know what else you would like to see us do, and be prepared to help us accomplish it. As I said earlier, please visit us. Facebook and Twitter, we're out there too. We're very not very active there, very inactive, I should say, but these are outposts of our way of thinking and important ways for us to increase and improve the impact of free thought and our ideas. It is your values that are at stake. If you're truly committed to those values, if you believe they're important, remember that belief is, as Charles Sanders Peirce, the American philosopher, pointed out, belief is a disposition to act. If you don't have a disposition to act on behalf of your ideas, what sort of ideas are those anyways? We find fault with others who do not act in support of the values that they say they hold, so let us act in support of our values. Together, we can do so much more than what we can each do individually. We are so lucky to have each other and this church, so let us make the most of it. And as Gandhi put it, be the future that you wish to see. So thank you and good morning. And with that, we'll move on to our after discussion. And remember, next week is our in-person get-together at the Embassy Suites, which is north of the airport in the DFW area. If you can't get there because you're located far away, well, we're sorry, but we'll be thinking of you too. Comment below and let us know what you thought about today's presentation. Thank you again.